Gonzalez. I'll be presenting our entrepreneurs of the night. We're going to start off with Mark Stansberry. He's the chairman of the Global Trade Development Group, or GTD Group, which comprises of several companies. They help companies expand internationally. He is a 1977 graduate of Oklahoma Christian University, a graduate of the Fund for American Studies, formerly the Institute of Economic and Political Systems, held at Georgetown University. He is the Intermediate School of Banking, held at Oklahoma State University, and Commercial and Agricultural Lending School, University of Oklahoma. He and his wife, Nancy, reside in Edmond, Oklahoma. They have 3 children. Would you please welcome me, or assist me in welcoming Mark Stansberry. Secondly, we have Joe Easton. He's the president and an equity owner of ISN Corporation, a global resource company that connects corporations to safe contractors, safe and reliable, that are suitable for them. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration. He graduated from OSU. Him and his wife and 4 children live in the Dallas, Texas area. If you could please assist me in welcoming Joe Easton. Then last but certainly not least, we have Linda Durbin. She's the president and owner of...
What's that?
Yeah, that's what I thought. That threw me off. Okay. Which is the U.S.-based company. She's located in Oklahoma City. She's provided actually quite a few jobs to people during the economic downturn. She's an active member of the EWF International. She graduated from OU in 1972 with a major in history and a minor in French. Because of her willingness to search out opportunity and take risks, she's earned the RIATA Distinguished Women Entrepreneur of the Year Award for high venture criteria. You could assist me in welcoming Linda.
So before we even go any further, is this a typo? Is this a typo for your business?
On that one it is. On the first one it was fine. On the second one it's not.
Exact?
Exact. It's the German spelling.
Aha, thank you. Thank you, we'll fix that. So why don't we start, well, Mr. Durbin, why don't we start with you? Why don't we start with you? Can you tell us, how about you give us sort of a little overview of your business, and especially on growth, your business and growth, and how we plug that in?
Okay. I started the business 23 years ago, not because I had some driving passion to become an entrepreneur, but because I wanted to eat. And I was running a small bankrupt company. I didn't bankrupt it. And I was looking for opportunities to generate cash flow and to grow this basically bankrupt company. I had little or no background in biomaterials research, pathology, histology, all of the things that I've been doing for the last 23 years. I showed up. And as Bill Gates' father says, sometimes the best way to get into business is to just show up. And I did. And I was presented with a challenge, and I was young, and I thought, sounds interesting, maybe I'll try this for a while. It has grown into a multi-million-dollar business. We import laboratory equipment that's made in Germany. It's precision capital goods. It's sold to, part of it is sold to biomaterials research companies. That includes big pharma, it includes universities, research hospitals, independent CROs, which are clinical research organizations. The German company that we represent started another product line that is involved in materials research, and that's electronics, nanotechnology, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, high-end electronic adhesives. And with each addition, we had mastered our market niche. We had become the market leader, the fact that we didn't have a lot of competition in it. And we have just gradually grown that portion of the business as the German manufacturer group. Well, about 50% of our business is not related to that at all. One of our orthopedic device company customers came to us and said, we have a need. We use your equipment and we slice and dice bones with metal in them, but we have to get those bones out of an animal or out of a patient somewhere halfway around the world, and we have to get it back to our lab. And we think there are probably regulations governing how we do that and how we package that. So about 15 years ago, we started a second division to manufacture packaging to transport medical specimens. It was a small market niche. Nobody was doing it. Customer had a need for it, and now that's a multi-million-dollar business. So in our case, growth has come because we have seen opportunity. We have been willing to invest whatever we needed to invest on any given day, and it's usually a lot of hours more than anything else. And we've grown a business. We have our facilities in Oklahoma. We also have another facility outside of Pittsburgh. We've got about 20 employees on any given day. And I'm at a point now where you say, do you want to keep this a lifestyle business, or do you want to let somebody else run?
Wow. Mr. Stansberry,
Yes.
have you tell us your story?
Mine. We are a business venture firm, GTD Group. We have, I live in Edmond, but I have an office in Tulsa and one in Washington, D.C. And part of that is the consulting side, as you mentioned, Alexis, as far as international consulting. But a big part of that, a part of the company is the business ventures. Got involved in the oil and gas business right out of college, and that was in 1977. And back then, there was some activity in the Anadarko Basin, which is western Oklahoma. So I got my experience back there as what they call the landman, and did some work as a landman for a company. And then a few years later, started my own company in the oil and gas business. Talking about growth, the gentleman and I started off with, he was a businessman, and he liked my idea of starting a business, and in the oil and gas business, that is. And so we invested money, mainly his, into my part of it, and we grew the company. And about 8.5 years as partnership with this gentleman, sold out to another company, had some great growth. It was during the time where the oil and gas business was doing very well, from the late 70s, early 80s. And then by around the 87, 88 time frame, the oil and gas business really took a beating for several years, actually. In fact, the oil and gas business was off and on through almost a depression for about 20 years. But I've stayed involved in the energy business all that time. In the meantime, I got in banking. Also served as a senior vice president of the bank while serving as president of the company, an oil and gas company. So started gearing up towards more of entrepreneurial. I was getting excited about not just, first of all, starting my own company, but looking at other business ventures. So got involved on the international front, first of all in Canada, in the Alberta province for oil and gas, doing acquisition up there. And so we started focusing, we had to be able to change. When it was exploration, it turned into acquisitions, because acquisitions really stopped and shut down quite a bit. So we fortunately started going into the acquisition stage. Even wrote a book on the acquisition process and due diligence, minimize risk, maximize return. Went on the speaking circuit, developed a acquisition firm that we did a lot of projects, both pipelines, oil and gas companies, several $1 billion worth of projects that we managed and completed in those years. And that really ended about 1997. But we got involved in the international front, then got involved with a federal government relations firm. And let me go step by step here, because as I saw opportunities, there may be a one-person operation, or it may be a company of 300. We saw some doors open. And so my job was to put monies together so that it would grow to a point that we wanted to exit out. Most of the companies we're invested in have an exit strategy, and that's either 3 to 5 years. And normally 5 is the max side for us. We build it up, and if it's we have to see cash flow growth. We build it up, and then we sell out. And so I'm a very small operation. I don't know how to compare it other than if you watch Pretty Woman, the gentleman there that did the deals had an attorney and a few advisors and put deals together. That's similar, but not necessarily his lifestyle. So take that for all of you. And so we've been involved in movie production. We've from movie productions to, in fact, one of my partners, Greg Frederiksen, who produced The Godfather 2, and he and I are working on a project right now together, documentary. It'll come out in March next year. Our investors are Ted Turner, Boone Pickens, Aubrey McClendon, some others that believe in this project we're putting together. And so it's really project driven as much as anything. And then end results. So to compare with a company that's ongoing and building for 20 years, ours, I've been in business now for almost 35 years, but it's more of a project by project, business by business. We have numerous businesses we've invested in, from environmental to energy. As I mentioned, we're very active right now in natural gas, especially Antelope Basin, and Barnett Shale, Marcellus Shale up in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York area. Not so much New York because of the legislation, regulations that we can't get passed. But we're active up there. We've been involved with an environmental company, construction company, PR firm. I can go on and on. And it's either like a one-man shop up to 150, 300. So anyway, that gives a quick overview.
Yes.
Anyway, thanks.
Well, that's wonderful. Although we're all disappointed that it's not straight out Pretty Women.
Yeah, I was trying.
So, Mr. Easton, Joe Easton, we actually have a clip we're going to show you. A little PowerPoint.
Craig, may we show the video first?
Sure can.
So, hi everybody, my name's Joe Easton. I'm the president of ISNet World. We started this company 10 years ago, my business partner and I, and he had worked for Chevron. I had worked for an energy company called Entergy. One thing we knew when we would hire contractors in the field is that we knew very little. We might know what they're going to charge us, maybe. We might know if they're bonded or insured, maybe. That's about it. We didn't know, are they adhering to the local, the federal safety standards? Are they following best practices? Are their people trained? What's the competency of the employees? Are they testing them through drug and alcohol? Background checks? Anything that you would want to know about a contractor before they come on your job site. This first slide talks a little bit about the trend, and over the years, many capital-intensive companies have gone toward outsourcing. If you look back, not that long ago, 1985, it was very common to see the company truck and the company hat and the person wearing the company logo on their overalls. But anymore, that's changed. If you fast forward to 2009, what you find, especially in the oil and gas industry, is that much of that work is outsourced, either for specialty reasons or for cost reasons. One thing with that is we find that the contractors tend to not adhere to the company policies as often or as much, and sometimes they don't know. If you look at the second slide, it's just an amalgamation of the data that we collect and we pull so that if a Chevron or a Chesapeake or a Devon can go in, take a quick snapshot of that contractor, then that dynamic data behind the scenes. Today we have 230 what we call owner clients, which are the oil and gas companies, large capital intensive companies. Those are some examples of those. We also have 35,000 contractor companies. So Some of you might say, okay, well, what are those? Well, that could be Joe's Welding Shop in Stillwater, Oklahoma, but it could also be Halliburton, both of which are our customers. Many times people think Halliburton's an oil company. They're not. They're a services company. They're a contractor. Thank you. Talk about growth. So real quick, if you look at 2001, when we started, we're headquartered in Dallas, Texas. We have about 230 people today. We used to have 2. We expanded as the company, as the business took us there and as the clients took us there. Mark talked about Calgary in particular. Calgary was our first office after Dallas, Sydney, Australia, LA, London, and we're opening one in New York, New Jersey this fall. So again, back to growth, and Craig mentioned earlier, growth is money, but growth is complexity, growth is people. Here's our group as we've grown, and we try to make it fun. That entrepreneurial spirit, that the way it used to be, kind of gets away from you. So you have to be a little creative to bring that back home. This is our latest photo of our entire company that we took a couple weeks ago. So, okay, that's it. Thank you.
Why don't we all come back up and we'll get started. So I maybe the first question I wanted to ask is, we heard different ways that you actually you came to growth. So this vision, how did you form the vision to go from small to big? Was it a constant adjustment there? Was it a shock? You know, when you got there, what happened? How did that happen? Well, since you're laughing the hardest, how about you, Mr. Durbin? How did you get there? What was that vision like?
For me, it was not a clear goal. What has driven the growth in our company has been my need for continued challenge. And if the challenge isn't there, then I go look for the challenge. It hasn't been because I want to have a company with 500 people or because I want to be the best distributor of X amount of capital goods in the territory. It's because I continually look for new challenges that are challenging to me. And there have been times when the growth has sort of, taken a little side turn. How do you get from high-end research equipment to packaging that costs $3.50? It was the challenge.
Yes.
It was there. Nobody else is doing this. It was for me, it's always been about the excitement of doing something new. And I wish I could say I had this brilliant business plan and that we follow it and that, every year when we do our strategic planning, we sit there and if we follow that plan and it leads us exactly where we think it's going to. I think that in and of itself, for me, would not be as challenging. My husband, who is also my partner in the business, is the engineer. I am the intuitive. It took us about 3 years to figure out how to communicate. And once we got to that point, we found that we usually ended up at the same point. We just had totally opposite ways of arriving here. But he said in the very beginning, because he came about 5 years after I started the company and said, I'll be your wingman. It's your vision, it's your challenge, it's your intuition, it's your creativity, it's meeting your needs. And he'd already been there and done that and had been president of an aerospace division of an engineering company. So he just has supported it. But for me, I wish I could say it was well crafted and well designed, but it really has been, you go into it with your eyes open, you look for the challenges, you wait for the opportunities, and you you don't be afraid to take them.
Yes, I would say, I like what you're saying, you know, being able to adapt, and the plan itself can change really quickly. Example, we mentioned about being in the energy business, in the natural gas side of it. Well, in the last 3 to 5 years, you've probably heard about the hydraulic fracking, and you've probably heard about the success of the hydraulic fracking in horizontal drilling throughout the United States. So what happened was, we have now oversupply, or what's happening is we have an oversupply of natural gas. So if we want to continue our growth, we're going to have to look at something besides just natural gas, even though I'm a strong believer in natural gas and the future of natural gas, and believe strongly that that's where we need to be and turn our, fleets into, as far as conversion to compressed natural gas and so forth. In the meantime, we have to have growth, make sure we keep our employees in place and so forth. So if you notice, a lot of companies, public companies, have been going to the oil side. And one successful company from Oklahoma has been very involved in the Bakken Play, which is up in North Dakota and Montana area. You've seen more emphasis that way in the last, especially in the last 6 months to a year, where we've seen transition going to be diversified, not just in natural gas only. So we've looked at that as well. We've been very careful not just to, at one point we were 90+% natural gas. We're not that today. We're investing more into the oil side as well to get a better balance, have a diversified portfolio, and also looking at other energy projects, solar, wind in particular. So you have to look at what be able to adapt. The business plan's not going to stay the same, because at the first of the year, or 12 months ago, I said natural gas is it. And so we've been looking at other alternatives, and of course we have been looking at wind anyway through the years, and solar, but really trying to get that diversified portfolio, being able to adapt. And communication, I will say, is so important in that not only between partners, but to whoever's involved with your project, letting them know what you really want to achieve and how you're going to get there. Not doing that, which I've done before, trying to keep it to myself, it doesn't always go too well. Need to be able to have the team understanding where you're trying to get to.
Our business is a software as a service, and right or wrong, we have bundled our products and services into a subscription business model. So on one side, the oil company or the manufacturing company pays an annual subscription, as does the contractor or the supplier, and they pay a flat fee. So we don't add, if we do add services or products, we don't upcharge them. Okay, they still pay the same annual fee. It's not to say we haven't had price adjustments over the last 10 years, but generally those prices stay consistent for about 3 years. So for us to grow, we have to add customers, all right? Now, if you look at our customer base, it's oil and gas or petrochem within the U.S. It's oil and gas, petrochem outside the U.S., okay, anywhere. And then it's outside of energy. So we have attacked that type of sector, those types of sectors. Examples of that would be, we started in the pipeline business. We started with pipeline clients, such as Kinder Morgan, Shell Pipeline, Enterprise Pipeline. Then that went to upstream clients, such as Chesapeake, or Devon, or ExxonMobil. That went to downstream, on and on and on, and then we've now gotten into manufacturing, such as Bell Helicopter. We've got into others, steel companies, U.S. Steel, Archer Daniel Midland, etc. And then, as you saw on the map, then we've expanded outside the borders. So all of those bring complexities, but I guess for us, you have to make sure you have the money. That's first and foremost. And then you can be a little more bullish on your growth tactics.
Well, since you, I heard the same sort of starting place. So why do you think most companies start small but then decide to stay small. And I've seen, and I've heard the different places where you've gone, but why do you think they stay small? After starting small?
Well, I think sometimes it's by choice. I mean, I think, like I said, it's a lifestyle business, and if that's what you choose, I think that's terrific. And there's different times in our tenure we thought that might be what it is. But we also knew we had to stay in position. All of our growth, I say all, majority of our growth has come from client pull. Okay? We didn't just decide that we're going to fly to Australia and start a business. Chevron said, we're digging holes in Australia, we're laying pipe in Australia, do you want to go? Absolutely. So that's how that happens. So if you can build a customer base that will lead you there, you're much better off. And sometimes you don't have a choice.
Why not?
Well, for us, if you look at many of our clients, they're multinational global companies. If they cannot find a single source solution at times, they may kick you to the curb. Now, that would not happen immediately, but it may happen in 5 to 10 to 15 years. So I think you always have to be in position. The other thing I think why companies don't grow is building people and multiplying yourself to do the job. I used to go on every meeting. I don't go on every meeting anymore. I don't go close to every meeting anymore. If you can't multiply yourself, you're never going to get there. We have a competitor, as an example, small competitor, and the president of the company, I've known him for 8 years, he still goes on all the appointments. And they're about 10% of our size. So that's one thing to consider.
Wow. What about you?
Yeah, there was one company that GTD Group invested in, or has invested in, it's still operating, and it's a small company, and it was by choice that the president of the company did not want to become large. He's outsourced a lot instead of adding a lot of employees. The rule of thumb for me, and I find this where it becomes choice, and he's doing a great job, and there is definitely the cash flows coming in and so forth. Could he grow? Yes, and so forth. But go back to the fact that an entrepreneur has a balance of time, great time management, and it doesn't mean that if you have the attitude of I'm going to work 5 to 8 so my employees can work 8 to 5. I think that is not where it categorizes. He's not that category. His category, he likes the 8 to 5. He sees success. I'm pleased. Could I be more pleased? Yes. But at the same time, he's got a great attitude. He delivers. It's a small company. We just know it's determined it's not going to be as a large growth, company that we sell out.
Yes.
When we exit from it, it'll be because he leaves. Because we just don't have the staff. He doesn't have the staff. And that's one example of a very small company that's been successful, but not to the point where, he wants to have a lot of employees rather outsource it and go out.
Wow. Mr. Irvin.
I think all entrepreneurs have an enormous emotional attachment to their business. And unless you have multiple talents, like the two gentlemen I'm sitting on the stage with, it's very hard to let go and to let others. And an entrepreneur can take a company just so far without bringing in new talent. And probably one of the most difficult things for an entrepreneur is to admit to himself or herself that perhaps they are not the person who's going to grow the business and take it to the next level. You may have all of the intuitive skills or the creative skills or the ideas, but you have to be willing to take the risk, and this is as much an emotional risk as anything, to open the business up and bring in the talent to help you grow if that's not your strength. And I think some entrepreneurs don't want to do that. They are very comfortable and they want to maintain the control.
Wow.
I agree.
Yeah.
That when I finally got away from micromanaging, much more success.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you've done, is get away, you can't be in every meeting.
Right.
And, well, it's working great.
It took 6 years to get there.
Yeah, I didn't go to therapy, but I needed to.
So delegating, letting go. What else? What else would it take to start to think about sort of managing that that growth? What else
It
contributes
takes
to
good
that?
people. I'm going to tell a failure story. We were growing rapidly enough up until 12 months ago that we had gone out and hired a new sales manager, 2 new salespeople, had doubled our facility space. Cash flow was funding it well. Everything was in place to really take us into the next level. And we lost our biggest customer. We've been growing about 15, 20% a year. And our biggest packaging customer, who is a big, huge company, if you can't single source it, they go start looking for alternate sources. Poof. And they're within 10% of our total gross revenue. And one of the toughest things as an entrepreneur is to say, okay, what do we do next? And quite honestly, we laid off all the new people. We sublet out the additional space. We pulled everything in. We're still having 5 to 10% growth, but I have to make up all that business before I'm back to even. So just when you think you've got it well planned and you've got everything in place and you've got people who are going to help you, the customer, your customer base can impact that. But having people on board who can help you with that growth, at least for me, was critical. I knew I could not take it to the next level by myself.
I see.
And I needed other people to help, since cloning is not an option. We need other people to help. And for us, that has been probably the single most difficult thing to find good people. The other problem is when you do grow rapidly, you outgrow your people. The business outgrows their capability, and that was one of the questions that was sent out. What happens when you outgrow the talent that you currently have? And these are people who've been with you 10 or 12 years and helped you get to this point, but they can't get you any farther.
So people, changing roles, delegation, these are all contributors, customers. What else?
Cash flow. Cash flow, for sure.
Oh, and cash flow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think one of the things for us is we have these parameters from a cash flow perspective. Generally speaking, where 25% of revenue goes to expenses, 25% goes to employees, and 50% goes to board discretion, shareholders, what have you. And if we can maintain those margins, then we can allow us to be very bullish in some of these new areas. If these areas take us out of that or jeopardize that too far, we'll probably back off of that. And that's kind of what we've done since the beginning. And I'm sure like Mark and Linda, you get asked to do a lot of things that aren't your business, and you have to recognize that. I truly believe in the hedgehog theory of sticking with what you know and what you do well. We just rolled out in Iraq actually about three months ago, and there was a lot of pushback. Oh, this will not work here. Your business model will not work. You must do this. You must do this. You must do this. And we said, you know what? It's probably not time for us then. And this was a joint venture with BP, PetroChina, and the Iraqi oil company. And finally, they came back to us and said, okay, let's do it your way. And it's going great. but you have to be able to turn and walk away from that growth at times.
Well, let's go the cash flow route a little bit. The cash flow route. So, was that a cash flow decision that you made there?
It was, because we operate that out of the London office. We have 10 employees in the London office. It's a lot easier for them. Still, there's a lot of back office done in Dallas. But since that implementation, you know, we've moved we had 5 in London, we moved 5 more to London. We've hired 4 Arabic speakers. We take them through our normal process. You know, we don't travel to Iraq, but we travel to places close, be it Istanbul or wherever, for meetings. And you know, anytime you add complexity like that, you're going to add cost. And don't think you're not. You always will. But if you can try to stay within your parameters, whatever those are, and not overextend, and your client is asking you to come, then I think it's a good mix.
Well, how'd you do that, Mr. Stansberry? How'd you manage your cash flow and growth? Because you just explained a business that's all over. How do you do that?
Well, as of late, you mentioned people being, having the right people, the right team, and cash flow being an important part of that. We try to stay ahead of the trend as much as possible on tools, which means if we make sure they have the proper tool, whether it's the iPad, whatever. We want to make sure, and it's amazing, the attitude goes up. First on the block to have the iPad or the iPhone or whatever, and to stay ahead of that trend and send them back to school. That budget, even though it's not, even though it's part of the budget and you don't necessarily like to say, well, I'm going to do that every time. It's the best thing to do is to keep investing in your people, in your team. And what surprises folks is even companies that are outsourced, we want to make sure they have the proper tools. So we definitely make that part of our budget.
But is that an easy thing to do when you're faced with all the other costs of growth?
It actually helps growth.
Really?
No question about it. You give it proper, for us, now I don't know about your experience on that, but I find that with the proper tools, the attitude goes up, and we, of course, can monitor it much better too.
Okay.
That's from our experience. Just the last few years.
Interesting. Ms. Durbin, because this growth of yours that came out of nowhere, so how did you manage your cash flow with growth?
When you have a great relationship with your bank, and we have not gone to outside investors. We've made a conscious decision that bringing in outside investors added yet another level of complexity and a reporting function and a whole lot of oversight, and we made the very conscious decision not to seek outside funding. So we have a great relationship with our bank. We try not to use it. It is our fallback position, should we ever need it. But when it comes to cash flow, we basically looked at trending for the most part. We've always had a phenomenal cash flow position. We've always, of course, in the old company, I actually remember saying prayers before we went to the post office when we first got started to make sure there was money for payroll. But we've always been in a very positive cash flow position. And that's what convinced us that the growth that we were anticipating and that we could self-fund and use lines of credit as our backup. As soon as that position changed, then it was as much a cash flow decision as anything to cut back the expenses, to pull everything back in, get back to a positive cash flow position, and then start the process over again.
So for all of you, cash flow is king?
Absolutely.
We've gotten away from the bank side, especially with economic conditions like it is, where yes, cash flow is very important. We don't have investors. We have investment groups that are either equal size or bigger that we team with. So they're managing their own investors or their own group. And so I only have to report to just a handful at all about our investments. So that has been good. It wasn't always that way. It was banks, you know, when it was international trade, letters of credit, line of credit, you name it. And we've now gotten away from a lot of that, the paper shuffling.
Wow.
And it really, that's another part of the cash flow
Mhm.
that really is a better position for us than years ago where we had to report to everybody. And especially when you're talking about banks, I mean, the paperwork itself can be, and reporting, you know, every month on your accounts receivable and accounts payable. We finally got away from that because even though we do report that to our investment group,
Yes.
it was just, there were basically too much reporting. To the point that we had to have just, you know, we became more lean. And I see more coming, lean business or lean universities or wherever, going that route.
Same with this.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we talk about people and so forth. People are expensive. Stuff's not. You know what I mean? I mean, you think about cutting back, it's like, yeah, good people are very expensive. But that's one thing you got to make sure that you're not overstaffed. You know, when I talk about 230 employees, we're still understaffed, if you can believe it. And part of that's intentional. You know, also, I think when you go through these times of, you know, companies, I believe they don't grow like this, they kind of grow like this. And we still today only have 1.5 people in our accounting department. Okay, we didn't have an HR person until last week. Outsourced all that. We outsourced co-location with our servers. We don't have a corporate lawyer. I mean, there's things, what we made a decision a long time ago, and we're now graduating past that, part about its necessity, especially when you start going cross-border. But all of our people were customer interfacing. And I think when we did that early on, it paid dividends. And you could really understand, you know, what was important, who was going to help you grow to the next level, who do you really not need. You know, it sounds a little strict, but I used to have a boss back when I was in the corporate world. You know, he would call it crew or cargo, and either the staff is either your crew and you're helping the ship move forward, or your cargo and you're slowing us down. And sadly, you have to ask yourself that question periodically.
But all where you're at now, it seems to be all the things you're talking about, the product of growth, of all these things happen. So has growth been a good thing for you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes? Necessarily a good thing?
What do you mean by necessarily?
Well, we have to be careful. We have to sort of be careful what we wish for. So with all the things that just happened, your new graduations, you know, to a new organization, was this what you counted on for growth? Is this where you wanted it to be? Is it going to take you everywhere you want to go?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
How about you two?
Sorry, go ahead. The short answer is yes, because as I mentioned earlier and as Linda mentioned, I truly believe if we had not done some of the things we had done, we wouldn't have the customers we have today still. I mean, not too long ago, I'm sitting in The Hague, you know, about 6 weeks ago, which is the world headquarters for Shell. I can guarantee you, if we weren't in London and we didn't roll out in the Middle East, Shell would not invite us to The Hague to have this meeting. There's no way. So those are things you have to be thankful for. On the other hand, just recognize, and we thought we were prepared for the complexity, the language challenges, the visa challenges, the different laws, you know, in different countries. We thought we were prepared, but you're never as prepared as you think you are. So it does. It just adds this level that, you know, I mean, I get on a plane to Perth, Australia. Does anybody know where Perth, Australia is? Well, Perth, you do? Perth is on the west coast of Australia. So you fly 16 hours to Sydney, you think, great, I'm here. Nope, you got another 5 hours to Perth. Okay, and that sounds very glamorous till you do it about 3 times. And it's not as glamorous or cheap. So,
I think the answer is yes, but at the same time, I'm never satisfied in the sense that I still, from my entrepreneurial standpoint, satisfied means I'm content,
Yeah.
Whatever that may be. I mean, if whatever happens that way. But at the same time, I can picture someone like Arm & Hammer, who's, in his 90s, he's still on the phone doing a deal. He would be now on the iPad or whatever doing a deal. I find that I still, even the growth has been good, it can be better, and at the same time, I continue to grow as a person as well. So I just see, hopefully when I'm 90, if I get back home safely tonight, that I'll have 40-some years there that I can still do some deals.
Wow. Sounds like, so growth is a little hardwired into you.
Well, I think growth very well may be the result of the true entrepreneurial spirit. You don't go into it thinking, I need to reach these growth steps. You go into it because you have an idea, you have a passion, and you want to do things your way as opposed to some other corporate way. You want to build a team. There are so many other things about it that I'm not at all sure that if you're good at what you do, that the growth doesn't follow. And you plan for it. You may go out and do everything you can to acquire it. But I'm not at all sure that in an awful lot of us, it's not a byproduct of being good at what we do.
Well, speaking of being good at what you do, so what if we talk about your customers a little bit? So a lot of you said, well, where we are because of our customers. So what's it cost you? I mean, we talked about cost. What's it cost you to get your customers, to keep your customers? How do you do that, and how do you sort of figure on those costs?
The customer, over a period of time, I figured out the customer's always right.
Is that the biggest cost?
And that's a pretty good cost. And, whether it's a service company that we've invested in or whatever, yeah, I was going to say, it's how they believe.
Yeah. What are those costs?
One of them can be cash flow. We deal with a lot of Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies. And thanks to Six Sigma, every purchasing agent in the world is graded on how good a deal they can cut for the company. The problem is when you have a Fortune 100 or a Fortune 500 or a Fortune 1000 company dealing with a small business, it can be very challenging. They want 45-day terms, they want 60-day terms, they want 90-day terms, and then they don't pay you within the terms that they agreed to in the first place. You're cash flowing your business. You've got and if you're selling into the medical arena, it's even worse because the government doesn't reimburse hospitals in a time of fashion. So to get your customer, you may have to give up cash flow. You may have to give up some of your security. You have the expense of going out and selling your product, which in this day and age, I'd like to think you could do more of it electronically, but you really can't. People do business with people. So you're in front of your customer, or your people are in front of your customer, and anymore there's a huge cost associated with that. And even more importantly, there's an even bigger cost associated with customer retention because somebody else is out there trying to take the business away from you.
Wow. So what do you do for customer retention? What's that?
You get back in front of your customer and you listen. The biggest part about getting a customer and keeping a customer is listening to the customer. You might have a great idea, but if it's not what the customer needs and it's not the solution for him, even if they buy it for a period of time, they're not going to buy it for long.
Ms. Jason, how do you do that?
That last point Linda made is, I think, extremely valuable. So we obviously have a lot of client meetings, customer meetings, prospect meetings. We often have users meetings or updates on software and the service, might be consortium meetings. So when we're in there might be anywhere from 2 to 6 of our own employees, and listening to maybe a group like this, and pretend for a moment you are a range of oil and gas companies out there, and their suggestions and so forth. One thing we do is every single one of our employees has a pad and a pen in their hand. And every question, every comment, we're taking copious notes. I don't care if they're drawing pictures. They better be looking like they're taking notes. Because guess what? What's happened now over the years, there's this joke going on with our customers. They're like, yeah, same thing to ISN. Boy, they're gonna write it down. I mean, they're taking notes, they're going back, and then we follow back up and say, ma'am, you mentioned this. Nancy, you mentioned this. John, you mentioned this. What did you mean? And that type of interaction takes it to a new level, I think. But you do have to over-service, and you have to be prepared to over-service, especially going into growth situations. Sometimes the cost is a little bit translucent because it's your people's time, and it may not catch up with you till afterwards. But you got to be cognizant of how much time you're spending, what they're spending time on, and so forth. And for us, from a pricing and a cost perspective, we're a little different. I've worked on both sides of it, but because we're a software as a service, we actually charge up front, and then we turn you on. So if you don't pay, you don't get turned on. So we don't have accounts receivable. So somebody, may not pay at the end of their 12 months, but then they may get turned off, So that's how it works. We also charge the same price for everybody, and we post it on the homepage. So all the oil companies, all the manufacturers pay the exact same annual fee. The contractors pay a different fee based on their size, but that's also posted on the homepage. So that was extremely difficult in the beginning. It's a lot less difficult now because of the critical mass, but again, it's a different business. But if that's something that you're able to do, I think it will cause or create or lessen the complexity on that side.
So the over-service, what's over-service?
Over-service is ConocoPhillips made the decision out of Houston to go forward with us several years ago, but there's 2 people maybe in Midland that aren't on board yet or aren't understanding. There might be the Calgary office may not be understanding or whatever. Bakersfield, California division may not be understanding. Well, guess what? We're getting on a plane. We're going to go out there, and if it takes 5 days, we're going to sit with them, make sure they understand the software, understand how to use it, answer any of the concerns, because at that point, you're going to build this people-to-people relationship, not only with corporate, but also the people, the boots on the ground, and then potentially turn them into a champion. And obviously, the stickiness of your product and service is going to be more intense.
Yeah.
But that's a cost, and you have to be willing to do that, and that's probably depends on what stage you're in your company.
Wow. So what's your biggest problem? So what's been the biggest problem that came with your growth? Customers sound like a challenge, but was that your biggest problem?
I remember the slide where you had in the middle where it was adventure, where it just stops, either you make it or you don't.
Yes.
And you might have a president of a company that does really well up to that point,
Yes.
but they're not able to lead it past that. The most difficult thing for me to do is stay loyal, which I wanted to help that person grow.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't replace that person or position them somewhere else in the company, or companies, then you may lose out. They may not be able to, they may not have been, they may have been great up to that point, but they can't carry the torch further. And I find that that is probably was my biggest weakness in the past, was being able, knowing that person needed to either move on or be repositioned in the companies. And also I remember one time in years ago that we saw the cash flow go down, about that time on the venture side, venture group.
Yes.
That the cash flow was going down, and instead of laying off, I needed to lay off about 15, 16 people, which I finally did. Should have done it much earlier. It would have helped them, but it would help them as well, because I could give them some time to adjust and so forth. We waited to where I almost had to let them go.
Yes.
And so that was back 25 years or so ago. So I think that weakness that I had in that, I don't have anymore, but I've had to work through it as a person. Because I think the hard part is you're loyal to that person you hired. They've done a great job. They did work 5 to 8, but they're not really ready to go to the next step. If you're going to have a budget of $2 or $3 million, all of a sudden you're going to $20 million in the next few years. They're not able to get there. So that's something that I've had to work through as a person.
I can see that. How about you, Ms. Joby?
People.
So the hardest part about growth was people?
Yeah. It always was. As the business owner, you're willing to invest whatever you have to, whether that's long hours, mortgage your house, spend your weekends, give up your vacations. You have this feeling that you can muscle your way through no matter what to get to the goal. And you can to a certain degree. But it would be so much easier if you had talented people to help you do it. And when you take a look at what getting to the next level means, and you look around you and you say, these people have been wonderful and they've gotten me from the ground floor to here, but knowing that not only might not be able to get yourself there, but you look around at your people and you know that they're not going to help get you there either. For me, that was the toughest thing. That was absolutely the toughest thing. And finding people who come in and buy into the vision, are willing to put in the effort, is difficult. And finding people with a really strong work ethic. I think we find more of those in certain parts of the country than in others. But it's hard to find people who have the same work ethic, who are willing to make the same commitment, who aren't going to go running out the door at 5 o'clock, who believe in getting the job done. And if it means you don't go home until 6 today, but you go home at 3 tomorrow, people who understand and can make that decision. So that has always been for us, finding that mix of people where you have the synergy, because you really need, and that's an overused word and I hate it, but you need to be able to feed off each other. An entrepreneur can only lead and pull and push people so far. Somebody has to keep feeding the entrepreneur. But we need to be nurtured just like the people that we work with, like we nurture them. And a lot of times, I don't know about you, but you feel like, it all flows out and there's not a lot from especially in a growth mode where it's flowing back. So you want to find people that feed your spirit, that feed your creativity, that you can sit down in a room with and say, okay, this is where we want to go this year, how do we get there? And nobody's waiting for you, the entrepreneur, to say how it's going to be. Everybody wants to be a part of it.
Wow. So the venture actually says as it grows, you actually outgrow some of your personnel. And you can't, there's no way to recharge that.
Not usually. Sometimes there is, but if they don't have the skill set,
Yes.
and you know you need someone who has lots more experience. Financially was our biggest thing. We had a great controller, but he wasn't a CFO. We needed a CFO. We outsourced a lot of it, and brought in consultants to give us that added dimension that we needed. But even at that, we still outgrew the controller because he was at a place where he did not want to go acquire the new skills, and we needed them.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd say three things: cash flow, people, and what's next for us. Those were the three. So cash flow, we talked about. People, we've talked about. To add to that, we have more of an up or out mentality with our staff. Truly, if you're not progressing or moving up, and up doesn't mean rank necessarily, but up means growing, contributing. And we will trim the tree. And you know, we tell everybody that up front coming in. There is an expectation, and we make that very clear. But you have to constantly monitor that to make sure you have. They don't have to be exactly like-minded, but they have to at least have similar goals. And then on the what's next, again, I said cash flow, people, and what's next. And that last one for us, being a bundled product, a bundled software product, you know, I'm not comparing ourselves to Microsoft at all, but when you look at how they went, you know, they had a Word, Microsoft Word, WordPerfect or whatever. You know, you start with one, and then they add, Excel and PowerPoint. You know, now they have a package. I'm simplifying it here, but you know, we went through a little bit of that where we had one finger hanging on one product that people wanted, and we'd often ask ourselves, man, what's next? Because one of these days, we're going to lose that grip.
Mm-hmm.
So before you know it, boom, we got another, and then that gives you, as I talked about earlier, the stickiness with your clients that, you know, it's not just the safety professional that's your champion, but now it's the foreman in the field or the controller or the procurement department or the lawyers. So you now build some strategic alliances within your clients.
Mm-hmm.
And that for us was struggling to find those next nails, so to speak.
I love that picture of the hand.
Yeah.
Let's have some questions there. Yes.
Okay, growth involves a team effort, but obviously there's key players involved. Have you ever offered incentives for growth, and are they effective?
Depends on the individual. Some incentives are great. It may be go back to what we said about tools, or maybe bonus or whatever. But if you don't have a passion, and I see it all the time, I'm giving opportunities to a lot of folks to do very well, and passion's not there. So if you have the desire to really get ahead, you can do it. But yes, we've given incentives, and I think it's a good thing to do that. But also separates people out. If you do go the incentive route, whether it's stock options or whatever it might be, that gives them some, you basically pick some folks out who are going to stand out, and that's what we hope to see.
How about you, Tim? Does it help your growth?
It can. I think as Mark said, it depends, is the answer for a lot of these things. But I mean, incentives come in different ways, right? There's money. There's a pat on the back. There's a promotion. There's let's go to the beer joint after work and eat pizza and drink beer for 3 hours. Some people are very motivated by that, right?
That's what got me here.
Hideaway. We just got some people's attention. But what I mean by that, the social aspect, right? I mean the social aspect of your job. And So it truly depends. What we do is we try to do all those things in different levels, and you have to recognize what motivates that person. We used to probably have a better handle on it on the first couple of tiers of the organization. I feel a very good handle on the more senior people and what motivates them. Stock options is one as well. For us, quickly, incentives, our compensation for every employee is part salary and part cash incentives. And we pay incentives not only on growth. So to us, because we're a renewal business, we pay the same on a renewal dollar as we do a growth dollar. But what we find, they work hand in hand. I mean, without them, you're not going to grow unless you have built that foundation and continue to hold that foundation. So, right or wrong for us, we have part salary, part monthly incentives. And those monthly incentives are based on how well the company's doing, but they're also based on you. And you get 2 scores every month if you're an employee. You either get a 1, 2, or a 3 for your individual contribution, and you also get a 1, 2, or 3 for your team contribution. So a 1 being good, a 3 not being not good. So a 1 is exceeding expectations, a 2 is meeting expectations, and a 3 is below expectations. Again, individual performance and team contribution. So you get these monthly, so you know exactly, kind of where you're heading, and then your incentives are tied to that.
And I agree with that. We'll have some that are looking at retirement. You may hire somebody, say my age, and they want to retire the next 5 to 10 years. That's a different incentive than the young man or woman that just got out of college, really looking for growth potentially. So you just have to model what will work. But yes, incentives are great.
Mr. Mantel, did you build incentives into your
We made them, yes, we did. And when we were building our growth plan last year, part of the problem was when you go out and you hire good talent, the base salaries are higher. And for some people, it's comfortable. So what you end up doing is, even though there is tremendous incentive if the growth is there, if they're not hungry, as you are as an entrepreneur, then you find that you put a lot out there in the way of base salary or base compensation or base benefits package, and they're not quite as eager to go for the rest of the compensation. So it's a fine line between what compensates someone in a baseline based on their experience and the talent that they're bringing, and how do you compensate them for performance? And that's always tricky. That's always been tricky, at least for me. People will come in, when I interview people, and I'm telling them about the company, and their eyes get this big, and we talk about the growth, and we talk about who our customers are, what we do, and the kinds of things that we do for them. They are eager to join, and at some point during the conversation, I look at them and I say, you do understand that I'm in sales, and that I'm very passionate about this business. So what I need to hear from you is what makes you passionate. What are your passions, and what do you want to do? And where do you want to be in 5 years as far as your career goes? And all too often what you hear back is a mirror of what you may have said. So getting people to open up when you're talking with them about helping you grow your company and helping you build something, you really have to burrow down and dig down to get down to what it is they are expecting, not just from you, but from whatever they want for the next 5, 10, 20 years of their life. What are their buttons? What are their hot buttons? And that's not always easy.
Yes.
How do you grow your company without damaging your company's culture?
Carefully.
I think there's damage in your culture, there's also damage in the integrity of your business, which are slightly different. You know, in other words, piling on maybe extra products or extra services that may take you away from what you build, that makes your customer base look twice at you. Culture is very important to us. You know, we talk a lot about smart, fit, and hungry, and that's what we go after, and that's what fits our culture: smart, fit, and hungry. I'd also add a fourth one. I call it a little bit the Lewis and Clark, because somebody that wants to think like an entrepreneur, somebody that doesn't mind traveling, that doesn't mind being in tough situations. So, you know, I think it goes back to the people conversation earlier. We've had, at different stages of our company, people that just wanted to be, I mean, they were comfortable. They did not want to take it up a notch, so to speak. And that's unfortunately when you may have to make a strict change. But I think it all starts at the beginning, recruiting and hiring and making sure that the expectation is set, that this is our goal. Before you get on that train, think twice.
And sometimes you just have damage to move forward.
Tell us more about that. You weren't expecting that.
Yeah. No, I didn't either through the years. But if the team that you put together is not ready to move through what you as an entrepreneur is ready to, as far as the vision, then that's the best time to let that team move on instead of trying to hold on, which I try to do, as I mentioned earlier.
Yes.
And so you may have a whole new looking company. Something you don't like necessarily, but if you're going to grow, you have to make a decision. Remember I mentioned where I was satisfied though with that one individual because of his being able to outsource. He still works 8 to 5 and so forth. That met my expectations because we've written down, not necessarily planned, but goals and objectives, and I'm satisfied with that because of the productivity and so forth. But if we're really trying to launch a company in a big way, if the team's not there, we have to let a new team come in. That's difficult, but it's necessary. Instead of me waiting like I did when I was younger and wait until I finally let those 15, 16 people go that I should have let go earlier, I would have been better off for the growth side of it. One thing I want to add on that, it's not really, when you mention that venture, the growth side of it, one thing I didn't mention that I want to mention right now, and it doesn't really lead into your question so much, but maybe it does. There's a point where we're ready to move forward, but we didn't put in our budget enough money. So when we came into we're ready to grow, but we didn't capitalize. You know, we didn't put, instead of $1 million in this project, we should have looked at it and said, you know, there's going to be some downtime, retraining, regrouping, and so forth to get to that next level.
Yes.
We could have invested maybe $1.5–2 million. We should have, and set that aside for the rainy day, so that we go to that next step, to the next level. And once we've already had our investors, or investment group, put that much money into it, you don't go back and say, oh, by the way, we're at that point now, we'd like to have another $500 million put back into this project. Had we budgeted properly and looked 3 to 5 years down the road and said it's going to take us 3 to 5 years, which we do now, instead of saying 1 to 2 years, whatever, just to get the money in, that's much more success. And that also factors into your question is the team may be ready, but you've got to be able to capitalize when they're not and move it forward. So that's
I would invite you to think of culture as a dynamic thing. The culture will change, and it should change. That doesn't mean that the basic foundation, that those things, lean, fast, and hungry, is that what it
That's smart, but not good.
was? Smart, fit, and hungry.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that goes away, but I think you have to understand that the corporate culture will change. And that as the business owner, it's your responsibility to make sure that as it is changing, whether it's broadening because you're now multinational, you are literally bringing in new cultures in as part of your company. You're bringing in everything from how women are perceived in the workplace to new religious factors to the politics and the geopolitics of it. Culture has to be a dynamic thing. And you as the business owner have the opportunity to direct that, to guide it, to embellish it, to help it to grow, to keep it healthy, or you as the business owner have the opportunity to choke it to death if you don't let it be the dynamic thing that it is.
Well, what is the key to your success so far?
Well, you have a business, you grow the business, that is a success. You have a culture, you grow the culture, that is a success. So, I don't know about you guys, but change in an organization is always hard, especially if it's not coming on a regular basis. You get people who, you haven't had any major change or you haven't gone through any major upheaval in 12 months and then something happens, all of a sudden you have a change-averse culture. So I think it's important that you keep that culture. It's kind of like starter for sourdough bread. It's a living, breathing thing. And when you're ready, then you take it, you add the flour to it, and it grows into something bigger and better. And I think you have to keep doing that. It doesn't mean you give up your vision. It doesn't mean that you give up your core set of values. It just means that just because you started here with this culture doesn't mean the culture has to stay there.
And just real quick, just to add to that, I mean, like I mentioned in the incentives earlier, I also think that drives the culture, right? I would not be honest with myself if I didn't say that. When again, you're getting a team score and you're getting an individual score that could ultimately dictate your compensation. Now, used to, that's the only reason people were doing it. And what's happened is now it's that and they want to do it. And they're sincerely, thinking about their teammate and helping their team and taking it to the next level. So at least I like to think that.
I'd add a factor there on that is when you have a company you put together, and for example, it's on the West Coast, and there's an exit strategy I was talking about, and we meet the exit, we found somebody ready to buy it, but they're going to move the company to Houston. It's a whole, you probably want to stay away from, it depends on people like Houston over the West Coast, but my point is there's some so really like where they are that it's tough on as far as personal. You take it out personally almost. It's tough.
This is kind of related to her question about culture, especially for Mr. Joe. You are going to a global market or international market, and you are encountering with different culture in Australia, different culture in Africa, and how those culture are affecting your mainstream culture, your company's mainstream culture, and how are you managing that one?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I will say though, out of the 230 employees that we have, 17 countries are represented. Okay, so percentage-wise, quite a bit diversity. Now that was even before we went global. So we are a true believer in, if the person is the right person, sponsoring the visa, going through the process, many of which came right from this university. So that gave us a head start a bit. I think the other thing is few of us and the senior management team had traveled, had been to some places, had studied some areas. So you just have to go for it, partly. But when we do go to a new area, we dispatch, for lack of better words, people from Dallas, and they may be born in Oklahoma or Texas, or they might have been born in Ethiopia, but live in Dallas, but they have the corporate culture, and we dispatch them to the new office, and they set up the office, and immediately we start hiring national. Okay? Now, it's not a lot of people. We have 10 people in London, we have 10 people in Calgary, we have 10 people in Australia, but half of those, so 5 of those 10 typically are local. And what we found is just the best way to do it. But I'll give you an exact example. In London yesterday, we let one of our new hires, he'd been with us for about 5 months, we had to let him go. Because culturally, he couldn't deal with it. We had 2 female managers, and he couldn't deal with it. Culturally, he could not deal with it, and it was the best thing. And he understood. And we part ways, and then we reload. And you're not gonna shoot perfect, But over time, we see these people start to adapt. We also bring them into Dallas, and we invest in them, be it Australia or London or Calgary or wherever it is, and have them spend about 3 to 4 months office in Dallas. We put them up in a corporate apartment next to the office and try to give them the Kool-Aid as much as possible. And then send them back.
How about, yes, how about that?
Whenever you're having prospects of new opportunities, do you have a set of criteria, something that you use to gauge the opportunities for best fit to your company, something that'll work out best for you?
So what type of opportunity are you thinking?
Growth opportunity.
Growth opportunity of any kind. So how do we evaluate what that is?
Right.
I think it goes back to what all of us have said up here. I think again back to how's it going to affect our parameters on our cash flow and profitability? How's it going to affect the team, the culture? How's it going to affect my time? Just kidding. Partly. I think you've got to know why you're doing it. As an example, our Australian business unit's been operating now for about 3 years, and it is not profitable. Okay? Now, North America, our business is vastly profitable. It's on the road to get there, but it has not advanced near as fast. But we knew that going in, but we looked at the opportunity because we said, look, this is a multinational customer wanting to take us there. And sure enough, because of that, we got another multinational customer in Australia, and sure enough, because of that, we got the Middle East. We would never have gotten the Middle East without going to Australia and losing money. So we knew that going in. So you have to truly ask yourself why. Now, at some point, if it doesn't make sense, you have to make the tough decision to step out of it. And we have made some mistakes, but you have to make sure those aren't fatal mistakes.
Ms. Newman, when you moved into
We moved into packaging from selling equipment, capital goods. In 1993, Hillary Clinton said healthcare reform. And our business in capital goods, selling to biomaterials researchers, dropped 50% in 1 year. Because every research dollar dried up and every big pharmaceutical company went waiting to see what happened. And do I want to be the queen of hazmat packaging for body parts? It was not something I had dreamed of for a long period of time. But we needed a consumable item. capital goods historically are cyclical. And you make hay when the sun shines, but when you're in a downturn, and even in medical, most downturns are not as steep as they are for other capital goods sales. You have to insulate against it. And when packaging presented itself, that's how we looked at it. It wasn't because we wanted to be in the box business. There's nothing, I still, to this day, when I go and do catalogs or websites for packaging, how do you make a box look sexy on a website, you know? You can't use a white background or you can't even see the white box. So it was challenging, but we needed, for the business, something that would sustain and move and even out the cash flow, even out the sales, even out the revenue, even out the ability to grow when we had downturns in capital goods. So you can look at growth in many ways. It can come because there is an opportunity or because your customer drags you into it. You can look at it as, how do I insulate my business from what's going on in the other part of my business? There are lots of reasons that you look at those growth opportunities and how you assess them. And sometimes, you're absolutely right, you take on something that is not a moneymaker because it gets you a different piece of business.
Yes, we were one of the first companies in China to form a relationship, import-export agreement with a trading company. And that was in 1994. The problem we had, going back to your question, on the cultural side, is, first of all, contracts. We didn't know, on both sides were way off. The negotiations and so forth. We did get the agreement. And the prospects were there. If you can imagine having this trade agreement, and it's really with the government as well. I mean, whoever at that point in time, the chairman of the minister, it was a minister of energy for a province, was also involved as the advisor to this trade company. So this was very, very controlled, if you want to call it that. The prospects were there. Oklahoma, front page, business news, we provided a trade agreement. So everybody's knocking down our door. But we weren't prepared. And so, first of all, the quality of the products that we're starting to import weren't there. Pliers, for example, if we had pliers that break, you know, there wasn't proper packaging. So the prospects were there. So how do we get there? I was looking for an individual, and ended up being a team. And the person I teamed up with owned a warehouse, very large warehouse, for just domestic products. Told him about the international side. It happens to be that his wife, originally from China, spoke Mandarin. Another factor was the hours difference. Back when I first got started in '94, I didn't have the iPhone. But I had a fax machine in my bedroom. Because of the hours difference, I might get a fax at 2 or 3 in the morning. They didn't, on the other end, they don't care. There's an order. So I was up all the time. And it's great now. I just much easier. But the prospects were there. What helped was having this team. First of all, to be able to bring the product in, have the husband-wife team where she would go over to China to see the products, see where it's manufactured, be able to speak the language, and she still goes over there to this day. I've been in China since '94, and we've had black tea that we've ordered. There, for example, we had a breakdown of communication with letter of credit and all things of where it should be actually transported. It's supposed to be transported from Hangzhou to, actually Hangzhou was where the tea was, it came from that area. Then to Ningpo, which is the port, where the port went out of. Then it was shipped to Japan, transshipped to Long Beach, and from Long Beach railed in. And back then there was what they called a tea examiner. There's only one tea examiner in the whole United States. So we had to factor all these different things in. So prospects, you better have the right team, teamed up with the right culture. understanding, and then we also, in the meantime, we've teamed up with a federal government relations firm, and we have an alliance with them. They're with 24 cities internationally. One city happened to be Beijing. So Beijing was the regulation side of it. Hangzhou was the business side of it, near Shanghai. And so we had to learn. And with that, talking about growth and expenditures, it was quite an education. But we wound up doing our own packaging over the years. We've now have a good client base and import about 30 products from China here. But it took a long time. It wasn't like overnight. And a lot of learning. Example, they wanted to sell the Dallas Cowboys, some of the what do you call it, coat, jacket, whatever. And I said, well, that'd be great. I'll make an approach on it, but send me a sample. And the sample was awful. I mean, it looked like, I don't know, like a cartoon. The jacket didn't look right. It looked horrible. So I had to explain to them, you've got to make the product quality exactly right, even better than what we're making over here in order to sell. And so, a lot of hurdles, but prospects can be there. Are you ready to meet? And we weren't. And we wound up getting there. Fortunately, didn't lose, lost some opportunities, yes, and lost some client potentially. But if you're prepared and get prepared and learn your lessons along the way, you get there.
I'm trying to go to the back.
Do you guys have a plan in place if a rapid demand does occur for your product or service in the phase of a couple of days, a couple of months? You're in kind of this software business, so server expansion and things like that. So what's your guys' plan if rapid growth does occur very quickly?
I think that was more of an issue early on than it is today, because now we have over prepared, from a server perspective, a co-location perspective, and now with technology you can monitor it easily. If you need to add one, you can do it in one day and be ready to roll, be it the actual web server or the image server or what have you. Probably more of a struggle is on the service side, how we're able to accommodate that. From a pure resource, because of the way we train the customers, there is a step process. It buys us some time, to absorb, and we now have it where, and when you think about it, we've got 230 people supporting 35,000 companies today. Okay, so we've been able, to maximize, that source. Today, if you fast forward, it's the language issue that's our biggest one, and we was out on a call last week with one of our existing customers in the U.S. that wants us to go to Brazil. That sounds really cool, right? I don't speak Portuguese, and we have no one in our company that speaks Portuguese. There's things we can do to translate the site. There's webcasts that we can do in Portuguese, but at some point we got to talk to somebody, right? That is when it really, we tap the brake and say, hey, we're not quite ready. And what the message we gave to the customer was, give us 6 months, and then we can go in 6 months. So we're already now recruiting Portuguese speakers, and I know it's surprising, but there's quite a few Portuguese speakers in Dallas, more than you would imagine, that are looking for customer service type jobs. But now we have to get them in, get them trained, product, culture, what have you, and go from there. So.
What about you?
I think strategic alliances with your other partners. are part of the planning process. For us, I need raw materials. We don't manufacture packaging. I don't have a manufacturing facility. What we do is we engineer packaging that meets all the criteria. And for us, there are all sorts of things that are part of that package. It's not a box. They might be shipping on dry ice, so there's insulation. There are primary containers that meet certain criteria for if you're transporting Ebola from the African continent back to the NIH, all the people in that transport chain have to be protected. So there are very stringent regulations about what that package looks like, what it's capable of doing, more importantly, what it's capable of withstanding. So we're basically an assembly operation. But if we got a huge order tomorrow or a huge new customer tomorrow, and we had to ship product, we have aligned ourselves and have worked with some very key vendors, and we have developed partnerships. I mean, they're truly partnerships. We work with them, they work with us. They have issues, we try and accommodate, and vice versa. And we have had that happen, where we've had a big pharmaceutical company come in because their hips have been recalled, and all of a sudden you have a massive need to get tens of thousands of kits out into the field for this recall. And you don't deal with the vendors who aren't going to be able to step up to the plate. The biggest problem we would have would be the same, and that is bringing on enough customer service support to support that. But that's also when the rest of your team jumps in. I answer the phone, our engineering answers the phone, our tech support answers the phone, and it's okay to say to a customer who's calling in, I can't give you an answer right now. I may not know the answer right now, but I will get back to you. And trust me, in the business I'm in, where I majored in history and I'm selling to engineers who are designing the next level of aircraft for fighters, and they're doing nanotechnology, and I have to go next week to a DOD conference and talk like I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to your question, but I can go find out. And when you are in a growth mode, you say that a lot. Somebody will call and say, we're going to need this, and we're going to need it from you, and we're going to need it by this date. Then you start coming back with what your options are. But it's okay to tell them, I don't know if I can do it. Let me go find out, and I'll come back to you and tell you exactly what I can do and what I can't do.
Since we're spikes in demand, is that growth, or is that just spike in demand for you?
It's usually growth, because if you can meet the spike in demand, it usually gets you a new customer.
Krista.
To what extent is growth embedded into your company culture? Like, if you were to step down in your position and not, be the person with the big vision, how prosperous would your company still be? Do you think it would still maintain that level of growth that you started in the beginning?
The exit strategy is when I exit, everything exits. So that's easy.
That's pretty much we went through an exercise 2 years ago where we had an opportunity perhaps to sell off part of our company. And the buyer looked at me and said, you are the business to too large a degree. If we're going to do this deal, you get to hire Mini-Me and you get to train them, and we want you for 3 years. So that's the level of commitment you have to make. And so in my company, we're still small enough that I'm still the driving force. I think if I were not there, the company would, I don't know that it would grow, but I think it would maintain. I don't think it would drop off. I think it would maintain.
We often talk about get hit by the bus scenario, and you have to have those unfortunate conversations. But I'd like to think without me, this thing's going to poof and go away. But I really don't really like to think that. I believe that we've set it up today. My style, right or wrong, is I kind of have a Knights of the Round Table group, which is our management team. It's a core group that brings a lot of different, idea diversity based on their position. But even though I have been the aggressive one, to kind of pull us in this scenarios, I think now they would continue just fine. But that takes a lot of planning.
It takes a lot of people too.
So many businesses have experienced failure when they grew too quickly. What do you guys believe are the main reasons that companies fail when they experience excessive growth?
For me, it was a team, having the right team.
I think it's not having the right people. I would agree with that completely. If it's a good opportunity, it's a good growth opportunity. I think the funding is out there. It may not be the way you want to get the funding, but I think the funding is out there, whether it's through venture capitalists or it's through the bank or it's hitting up your family. I think funding can be acquired assuming you're running a good business. But if you don't have the right people, and if you don't have the right butts in the right seats on the bus, then that can be instant failure. If you get a really great opportunity and you're driving it and nobody's helping you do it.
I think there's always that ego and emotional part of it. You've got to keep that away. To open new offices globally, just to say you have cool offices in London is absolutely the wrong reason to do it. And we see, I think as you all are studying, we've studied and see businesses, many of them have done that and unfortunately have failed. It's cost them. And not just an office, but maybe it's a new product line, or maybe it's a new service, or maybe, as I mentioned earlier, it takes away from the integrity of your core business. You look at that, with an Enron as an example. So those things, you just have to watch and be careful. But all those things, people, money, ego, you've got to make sure that it doesn't take you down a slippery slope. So.
One thing that I think is hard for entrepreneurs to learn, and I belong to a group of women entrepreneurs. We all have our own businesses, and I was amazed when I joined this group that so many business owners don't understand the numbers. They don't understand, and it's not that you have to make A's in your statistic courses either. You look at your P&L, especially in the early days, you look at it daily. You look at your receivables, you look at your payables. If you don't have a good sense of where your business is from a number standpoint, I don't care how good everything else is, you can still fail. So I am continually encouraging people to look at the numbers.
And don't fool yourself either.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not that bad. No. If it's that bad, face it. It's that bad.
My checkbook.
We talk about a lot of entrepreneurs have an internal locus of control, very positive, think they can change things, that extreme optimism. Have you ever found that optimism to get in the way of you maybe went for a growth opportunity you shouldn't have because you saw all the positives and forgot to look at the negatives?
Yes.
How do you prevent that? Well,
How do you prevent it?
Yeah, how do you gauge yourself?
I had to go through the growth as a person, as I mentioned. And it took me several years because you want everything to be successful and you don't want to look at anything as, oh, by the way, I messed up. So it's going back and saying, yep, I messed up. We got to close this door. And that's hard to do. and, because it is part of the ego that you just have to do. I would say that what helps is what Steve Jobs said about, it goes back to being hungry. He said, what is it, be foolish and hungry?
That's right.
And that means, also staying ahead. It didn't mean just be foolish. It means, stay ahead of the curve. Make some good decisions and look at the bright side. But also, I think Steve Jobs is the type that would admit his failures. That's why he's so successful. It's a good model as well.
I don't know about these two, but I'm willing to bet that they learn their best lessons by making the mistakes. Because you can't learn this in school. You will learn it on the job. If you're lucky enough to have great mentors, they might steer you away from the catastrophic mistake, but you're going to learn from your mistakes, and you have to make them. You'll either make them in bad hiring decisions, you'll make them in a bad cash flow decision, you'll make them in a bad opportunity decision, but you have to make them. You're not going to escape them. Look at them as learning experiences, because that's exactly what they are. If you don't learn from them, then that's a problem. That is a recipe for failure. But it's like I tell our employees, I expect you to make mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, you're not stretching. So if I'm not making mistakes, I'm not stretching. And I just don't like making the same mistake twice. I just as soon move on to a bigger and better mistake.
This is my second try. So my first try didn't work. First try was a completely different business 13 years ago. And after about 9 months, we realized this was not going to work. After we'd spent lots of money, lots of time. And it was hard, as Mark mentioned, but we knew let's cut it, it's not going to happen, let's get on with our lives. But you learn a lot from that. You learn the warning signs, the warning bells. Kind of start getting, it looks a little creepy. That's kind of what happened before. And you learn to take steps that aren't giant steps that you can't recover from. Let's take a little step here. So I guess an example for our current business was one time a prominent client or new prospect talked us into deviating from our business model back in 2005. Okay, well maybe they know more than I do. Maybe they're smarter. And they probably were, but for this particular thing, it didn't work. We had to back out of it and basically say, we're going to go to our traditional business. We understand you don't want to do it, that's fine. And we parted ways after we'd spent the money and the resources. But we had a good story. So this would come up in the future, and now we had a case study to say, and here's why it doesn't work. Bam, 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 bam. So we had a pithy answer for these questions. And incidentally, 3 years ago, that same major oil company came back to us as one of our best clients today, using our model. But I would just say on all these things, measure twice and cut once, as much as you can.
Wow. Way in the back.
Some businesses attempt to expand too early and then they fail. Others never expand when they have to and they fail too. So how do you know it's the perfect time for your company to expand?
You two go ahead.
You don't. You don't. At least I never did. I've always said I'd rather be lucky than good, and I call that intuition. For some people, they get lucky because they sit down and they map it out. For other people, they get lucky because they recognize opportunity when it comes along, and they have that gift. Other people get lucky because they can read the market. look at Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. So there is no formula. There is no perfect time. In fact, I can almost guarantee that it will never be the perfect time, because we thought it was a perfect time 12 months ago, and look what happened. I mean, you know, by all the textbooks, it should have been the perfect time. Wrong, because life happens, or as the saying goes, shit happens. And you can't plan for that. You can be prepared, but you can't put it in your plan because you don't know. And so there really is no perfect time. It really is making sure you're ready for the opportunity as best you can be when it shows up. You can go out and create the opportunity, but sure enough, when you do that, you haven't planned enough, or you have planned too much, or you planned over here when you actually ended up creating the opportunity over here.
Well said.
Just quickly, I would say that question too is a little bit related to the previous question, the fact of, you know, opportunities. One thing I didn't mention that maybe I did, I didn't mention fully, is that I rely heavily on our core group's opinion. So, and don't go to the person that's going to agree with you, okay? Try some people that you know are going to give you some challenging questions. Might be your parent, might be your sibling, might be your instructor, that are going to ask you these hard questions, and you're not going to want to hear it. You're going to want to hear, God, that's great. That's a great idea. Even when you've already got the company going and it's moving, you know. So many times I bounce these types of questions off of our core group. Sometimes even I bounce them off of new people just to see what they say. Now, ultimately, you got to make a decision, so you can't dwell in it. But some counsel is wise.
Back to an earlier question on this question. Can you talk a little bit about the implications for growth of accountability, outside accountability, for instance, by having outside investors or by having a board that has outside people on it?
I don't. So that's not our situation. It's
so absent those things, do you think you've probably grown more than you would have otherwise grown, or less?
Probably less. And the reason that I say that is something I said earlier. Having that outside input, and I just got involved with the group of other women business owners in the last couple of years, and that has helped. But having that outside input, it helps you take off those blinders. And entrepreneurs, especially in the early going, get bogged down in working in the business, not working on the business. And I'm sure you all have heard that a gazillion times. But if you're the business owner and you're the entrepreneur, you need to be the vision, you need to be thinking about the future, you need to be doing the planning, you need to be looking for the opportunity. You don't need to be doing the nits and the grits of running the business day in and day out. And most entrepreneurs, especially in the early stages, have a tendency to spend way too much time in the detail of the company and not enough in the forward thinking for the company. In the very early stages, I actually did have the IHOP Pancake House Saturday morning board. And it was two guys. One of them ended up being president of AT&T Wireless. And the other one, and he was the marketing guy, and the other one was the finance guy, because I didn't have either of those within the company. And we would meet on Saturday morning. And it was energizing for me. It was not energy draining, even though they often told me things I didn't want to hear. But it was energizing. And I was probably more effective in those days than in the days after they both moved out of town, and I never recreated that board. So now I have to travel out of town if I want that kind of energy, nurturing, think outside the box, gee, wouldn't that be great if, kind of thing. So I think a board gives you that, and I wish I had it. Could use it right about now.
How about you?
At our situation, we're privately held. We do have a board of directors, very small. We do have a very small advisory board as well. I myself wear 3 hats, so I'm a board member, I have that hat. I'm a shareholder, I have that hat, and I'm also an employee. And you have to understand your fiduciary duty when you're looking at different items, and it's very difficult when you are the entrepreneur of the business. You learn over time to do that, and we've had some counsel from our attorneys that's helped us through that over the last 10 years. But I believe that having a small, limited audience that was on board and believed, or either employees or believed in what we were doing, actually helped our growth early on. Because I do believe outside may or may not have been as supportive. But again, I don't know. I mean, I think it depends on, if Meg Whitman would have been on the board, we might have had a different thought. Now, as we fast forward, here we are, more of an established company. The growth, is continuing. We fortunately have been included on many lists. So what that has brought is a plethora of private equity companies. We are not private equity backed. We're not outside investor backed. We have no debt. So these guys are going, this is great. We've been on the Fortune 5,000 thing a few years in a row. So you get on these lists and they're like, okay, let's do it. So for a while, we would bring them in and let them give us their pitch. And most times they say, well, we're going to give you, we'll throw money into the business. And we have, maybe some help. We know some people are expertise. But really, when we step back, they weren't bringing that much. If there is a situation, be it an acquisition that we may want to make, or an expansion of services, I think that's when it could be key. But they've all said they want to take it, obviously, in their best interest. I mean, they're on the growth mind, right? They want to get in 5 years, take this thing, 10 times, cash out and go. So they're going to have a different mindset than maybe a strategic buyer or a friend. So.
I've served on both public and private corporations, and the accountability factor we've tried to model, especially with Sarbanes-Oxley and some other factors there that, in fact, I attend school, just got back from the University of Texas at Dallas, where they had a corporate governance course. We're, like what you're saying, we're different hats, but that's important to keep up with all the different regs and apply those in the private sector, because I think those are very important. And to have some outside directors, which on these I was an independent director, both on the private and the public. And on the accountability side, I mean, I've served on audit committee, for example. That's very important that you have that structure with the private side as well, both for internal and external auditing. That you keep your, you keep the numbers correct, and that way you have that external auditor out there as well. But like I said, I've attended quite a few schools at Stanford, Rice, you name it. Just keep up, and it helps me be able to ask questions I didn't even think about asking. It helps me to be more aware of some situations, are you set up properly so that there won't be fraud, or if there is, how do you handle it? I mean, those are factors we need to talk about, and that stops growth, by the way, in a big way. So you've got to be able to take all this learning, think about how to structure both your own company, because that can happen in a private company too, not just a big public company. And so you have your different committees for a reason. You have a strategic planning, you have an audit committee for growth. Do that with the small company as well as the big company, several $100 million companies, one that I'm involved with. And so, yeah, I think accountability is a big factor.
Of course, we could ask more, as you can see, but Alex, why don't you come up and give us what our takeaway should be?
Okay. There's obviously a lot of points to be taken out of this. From Linda, I had you go in with your eyes open and look for opportunity. Culture is dynamic. It will and should change. You as a business owner have the ability to help it flourish or to choke it out. Having people on board to help you with growth is critical. Cloning is not an option. Sometimes it is important to go the opposite way of growth and downsize if you don't have the proper cash flow. And growth is part of the spirit of the entrepreneur. There will never be a perfect time. Shit happens. The best you can do is prepare yourself. You can look at growth as an opportunity, as necessary means to keep customers, or as insulation. And it is okay to say, I don't know the answer, but I can find out. From Mark Stansberry, you have the ability, you have to be able to adapt. The business plan won't stay the same. Investing in your people and making a part of the budget is good for growth. The customer is always right. Failure to replace people who can't carry the torch can delay or prevent growth. Incentives and opportunities can't always motivate people who don't have the passion to grow. Sometimes you have to accept change as a consequence of moving forward. And for prospects, you need to have the right team and culture. Finally, sometimes you have to say, I messed up. From Joe Easton, I have stick with what you know and what you do well. You have to be able to turn away and walk away from growth if you are uncomfortable with it. People are expensive. Be prepared to over-service, especially in order to receive growth. Growth can both damage culture and integrity, and you have to know why you are growing, because if you don't know why, then you might as well fail. Ego is absolutely the wrong reason to grow. Don't go to the person who agrees with you. Find people who ask the important and challenging questions. And finally, you have to be honest with yourself about your situation.
That was wonderful. We enjoyed having you here so much, and thank you for coming. We have something for your contribution.
Thank you so much.